What's up guys, Asian here again with another build video. This is part 3 of our tanking guide, specifically for the Dragonknight tank. In this part of our guide, I'm going to show you guys how tanking goes on ESO, because it is kind of different compared to other MMOs. So this is kind of the style that I tank in. Your style might differ, you might see other people tank in different ways, but I'm going to give you guys some of the generic pointers for various situations you will find yourself in. So this is kind of a collection of different clips from dungeon videos and trials guides that kind of show you guys how to tank in different scenarios here. So just starting off here, we're going to skip this first group of ads here in Bloodroot and just go straight for the first boss. So this boss is kind of what you would do if you have a boss that summons ads during the fight. So obviously, as a tank, your first priority is going to be to taunt the boss, make sure that it's facing away from the group. A lot of bosses have frontal conal moves like that one there, so you want to make sure the boss is facing away from the group at all times. Now when the ads spawn, you're going to want to use talents like I did there to kind of hold them in place, and while they're in place you want to go ahead and taunt any of the ads that are priority ads. So anything that basically does a lot of damage or has a special sort of mechanic, you want to taunt those to make sure they aren't hitting your allies. So you want to use talents specifically so you can keep them in place. That way your DPS and healers can move to a different location and they'll just make it easy for you to go around and taunt them. You can also use chains, unrelenting grip, to pull ads towards you. So that will make them, that also acts as a soft taunt, so they'll attack you for a little bit. You still need to hard taunt them with either the sword and shield taunt or the range taunt, the undaunted taunt. But it'll help out, especially when you have an ad that's kind of following a DPS or a healer around. So here, this is kind of what you should do for trash pulls. You can see here I'm making liberal use of unrelenting grip to pull ads away from the DPS and healer, and make sure they are always on top of me. Once I finish chaining them, I follow up with the sword and shield taunt, because even though chains does act as a soft taunt, it is not permanent. Basically, what that means is, right when you chain them, you see here they'll try to attack you. For a few seconds, it's between 3 and 4 seconds, but they'll eventually lose that soft taunt and just go attack somebody else. So that's why you want, as soon as you chain, you want to taunt them with either the undaunted taunt or the melee taunt. Once you have all the ads grouped together, you kind of want to make sure they stay in place, so you don't want to move around a lot. You can move around to try to gather ads that are still untaunted or unchained, but ideally your DPS and healer will be able to keep the ads grouped together. You can use talents to kind of keep them in place and allow the DPS to basically use their AoEs to burn them down. That's kind of the most important part of ad pulls, of trash pulls, is to keep the ads together. The further apart they are, the harder it is and the slower it'll be to burn through all of the trash, because the AoEs aren't able to hit everybody. So once again, we're going to go through a different DLC dungeon now. This is Falkreath Hold. Gonna go ahead and skip these first couple of ads, and you guys will see again how do you deal with a boss that doesn't necessarily summon ads but has ads with it right at the beginning of a fight. There are a couple bosses like this, and you kind of have to know what the priority targets are in these fights. Obviously the boss is going to be the priority target. It's the first thing you want to taunt, but there are other sometimes there are going to be other ads that you're also going to want to taunt with them. So you see here I first taunted the Minotaur and then went for the boss. That's because the Minotaur does have a heavy attack that can one-shot our DPS and healers. The boss itself is not quite as dangerous, doesn't have any one-shots. And again, you want to face the boss away from the group. Make sure to keep all the ads taunted and around the boss so they die to DPS cleave. So now you see here there aren't any more ads, the ads are cleared out, and this basically goes back to your standard tank and spank. Basically tank taunts, DPS and healer just stand behind the boss and just basically hit it until it dies. So there we go. So on bosses without ads, without any sort of really special mechanics, you can just do what's called tank and spank. Basically, you taunt the boss, and you let your DPS and healers just keep wailing on it until it dies. Now for this boss fight, you're going to kind of see how to control bosses that have charge moves or moves that make them move around, mechanics like that. So the Mammoth here has a charge move that he will do right here. Some of them you can stop by blocking, but the Mammoth will keep on going regardless of if you're blocking. Now with fights like this, you want to control where the boss is going to charge. So you want to be aware of where your DPS and healer are. You can see here I'm kind of checking behind me here and there to make sure that if he does end up charging, he doesn't charge into my allies. And then you kind of want to face him in such a way that when he does charge, he travels the smallest distance possible. So for here, first I want him to charge into the wall, the door here, and then I want to kind of make sure to keep him kind of along that wall there, the Falkreath wall. That's just to make sure that he's moving around as little as possible when he does charge, so the ground AoE's dots will continue to tick on the boss. Now for this ad pull, we're going to be talking about what you should do when you have priority ads. So in Falkreath, the Minotaurs are the ads that you want to taunt first, because they just have attacks that do a lot of damage, and you want to make sure those aren't hitting your DPS and healer, because they don't have the same resistances, they don't have the same amount of health that you do. So in some dungeons you kind of don't want to rush into it. Since you are the tank, you are the one leading the charge, so you kind of want to, in some instances, kind of control the fight and wait for everything to be in place before you go ahead and start the fight. So with priority ads, you obviously want to taunt them first. So you can see here I taunted the Minotaur first, and then I started taunting everything else and chaining them together. And so now for this next ad pull, we have two priority ads. Both of them are Minotaurs. So you want to taunt both of them. Now, if you have a ranged ad, like this ranged Minotaur here, you kind of want to bring all of the melee ads to the ranged ads if you can. So for these pulls where you have a lot of priority ads where there's a lot of damage coming out, don't be afraid to use barrier like I did there, especially if you're going for a no-death run. We were attempting a no-death run here. So barrier is very powerful. That's kind of where you're going to want to use barrier in 4-man content, where you kind of want to avoid as much damage as possible. And for this part of the video, we're going to be going over how I tank when I need to self-sustain. Basically, when I don't get access to a healer giving me orbs or shards or anything like that. Classic example of this, as you can see here, is the final boss of VDSA. Most strats that people use is to take the ads away from the main boss and just have the tank play with them over here. So you can see here, I am not using Ebon, I'm using Plague Doctor and Dragon Guard for sustain, and I'm just making sure to hold my block up and to maintain basically my resources the whole time. I do have a magic caster, so I'm able to use Absorb Magic to keep my health up. And you can see on my back bar there I have a couple of healing abilities. I have Purge there in case I need to purge anything, and all of my standard range taunt. I have my front bar has my taunt and heroic slash. And so you can see here I'm just keeping my block up when if I need to get resources or if I know I'm going to take a lot of damage going through some certain places. You can see here all the fire going out. I'll use Magma Shell to get out. You can see here I am sprinting every once in a while, but making sure to hold my block this whole time. You can see I'm not exactly using my potions yet. I try not to use my potions until I absolutely need to. You can see there I just use it because I was basically out of magic at that point. So you can see here it's basically I'm using my shield, I'm swapping over to my heal, what I call the heal bar whenever I need to get healed up. Making sure to keep everything taunted. You can see I'm trying to maintain my stamina as best I can. Occasionally do the pierce armor, make sure to hit heroic slash every once in a while, make sure I have the minor heroism, and that's kind of how you self-sustain. I recommend using Plague and Dragon Guard when you have to self-sustain. It just makes it easier. You don't have to wait as long for magma shell to get up, which is pretty important, but your bars are obviously going to change. I like to have my tanking bar, which has Absorb Magic and Igneous, the Pierce Armor, and Heroic Slash, and my back bar is normally the Heal bar, where I have Purge for some extra Magicka regen, and as well as Vigor and Green Dragon Blood, in order to keep myself healed up. Obviously, you saw I didn't pop my pots until I absolutely needed to. Basically, when my magic or stamina drops to about 5%, that's when I pop my pot if it is up. So that's kind of how I self-sustain on a tank. That's how you... There are only a handful of fights in the game where you have to do this, but that's kind of what I do when I have to deal with the self-sustaining. So that's it for part 3 of the tank guide. Hope this helps, and I will see you guys in the next dungeon.